United States of America, North Carolina High School. PE teacher Miss Lucy Carrot once again warned everyone that everyone should wear their school uniform properly and keep the zipper up. Wait, don't come to class without a uniform, I've said more than once. The school year had just begun, and he was already breaking the rules. Lucy was adamant about the rules, despite the fact that the guy was the head of the class. With a smile on his face, the student said that he had the uniform in his briefcase, and because of the heat outside, he decided that today he could just bring it with him. Even though the first day of school had just begun, the teacher was already out of sorts and promised to deduct 5 points from the boy's mark for behavior, and he still had 10 laps of running ahead of him as punishment for violating discipline. The guy did not expect this at all on the first day of classes. The smile quickly disappeared from his face, and he quickly began to take out his uniform from his briefcase, begging the teacher not to deduct points for behavior. The physical education teacher saw her students not rushing to class, but intently looking at something. "What's going on here?" said Miss Lucy. She saw some young guy pestering her student, as it seemed to her at first glance. With a quick step, the teacher hurried to the girl, began to examine her, and began to ask if she was okay and what this guy wanted from her. Miss Lucy poured cold water on him. The guy was extremely outraged and could not immediately understand what happened and why she did it. Let him say thank you that I didn't pour boiling water on him. Or maybe she should have offered him a warm bath, the teacher thought. A student immediately rushed to the defense of this guy and began to reassure Miss Lucy that she had misunderstood everything since the girl was going down the stairs, fell and sprained her ankle, and this young man tried to help her. The guy also began to make excuses and say that Miss misunderstood everything, and he just wanted to help. At the same moment, the physical education teacher realized that this was her school love, Jeremy Baskett. Could it be that after so many years she saw him again? But it seemed to her that he did not recognize her at all. Jeremy stood indignant because his shirt was all wet and he couldn't stand in front of the students like that. Miss Lucy suggested taking her trowel. It might not be quite right for him, but it would help hide the stains. Jeremy Baskett was still adamant and did not want to take the trowel because he had a ceremony ahead, and this was not exactly the type of clothing for this event. From his shirt pocket, the guy took out a sheet of paper, which was completely wet, and it was impossible to make out the text written on it. Miss Lucy suggested that we try to help him. Maybe she could figure something out. Mr. Baskett thanked her, but was forced to refuse, because if he himself could not understand his text, it was unlikely that she would be able to do it. 7 whole years have passed, and Jeremy has hardly changed, still the same innocent face and those beautiful eyes. But he really didn't recognize her, Miss Carrot thought. Her thoughts were interrupted by Jeremy's voice. He said that next time she would understand the situation before attacking people, and if it didn't bother her, he asked her to take the girl to the first aid station since her leg was still injured. Miss Lucy took the student to the nurse's station and headed to the staff room, where she met her colleague, who sat in disbelief and listened to the argument between the headmaster and Mr. Bobby. A colleague began to tell Lucy that the argument was about a new teacher, some young teacher who would teach classes in the 1st grade. The new teacher is only 25 years old. He has very little work experience. How can he be a class teacher of such an elite class? Mr. Bobby insisted. The director was adamant in his decision, because despite the fact that the new student has very little work experience, it is worth taking into account the fact that all his students from the former school have 100% enrollment and 90% enrollment in the best universities in the country. In the staff room, there was a heated discussion about the new teacher. Is it really possible that Mr. Jeremy has very little work experience, but has such colossal successes? And then his gaze fell on Mr. Jeremy, who appeared in the teacher's room. The director immediately invited him to come in and not be shy. They have a wonderful team. The teachers all greeted us friendly and were glad to see a new teacher in their team, especially such a young and handsome one. Only Lucy was at a loss and did not know how to hide her emotions, either joy or fear, that she had met her school love again after so many years. Beginning of Chapter 2, United States of America, North Carolina, High School, Ceremony in the Auditorium. The director asked to welcome the new teacher, Mr. Jeremy Baskett, with his speech. At the same moment, the hall erupted into thunderous applause. The new teacher introduced himself and said that from that day on he would teach mathematics lessons. But as soon as he stepped on stage, the whole hall began to whisper about what a handsome teacher would now teach the lessons. Mr. Jeremy continued his speech about how very glad he was that he was privileged to return to his school, but as a teacher, and how grateful he was to the school principal for this opportunity. Throughout the ceremony, Miss Lucy sat motionless and listened carefully to the speech of her old friend. But at some point she realized that he was speaking without his notes, which means he knew everything by heart and thereby lied to her. Then her anger was interrupted. She saw the scars on his hand and at the same moment thought whether this was really an injury from that very incident. In the staff room, everyone celebrated the beginning of the new school year. And for one thing, everyone congratulated Mr. Jeremy Baskett that he had returned to his home school again. But as a teacher, Miss Lucy, together with her colleague Miss Dory, sat in the corner of the teacher's room and discussed the new teacher, or rather his past connected with Lucy. But one of the teachers thought that this was his first love, and then everyone immediately rushed to them with questions. Miss Carrot immediately came to her senses and began to say in panic that no one was talking about first love, and she and Dory were discussing how to knead the dough correctly. Lucy immediately attacked her friend and asked her to keep quiet, or because of her, rumors about her and Jeremy would now spread throughout the school. Suddenly, the mood of the physical education teacher changed, and she sat down and became sad, because when they graduated from school, her love with Jeremy stopped. Or rather, it didn't exist at all. She was simply rejected. None of them even said a word in parting, and yet she had so hoped that something might work out between them. Lucy was lost in her thoughts about her first love and couldn't understand whether it was good or bad that Jeremy didn't remember her at all. At one point, she was interrupted by the words of the director, who insisted that her friend Miss Dory drink 2 glasses as punishment for missing their last meeting. Miss Dory winced. She didn't like to drink, so she tried to skip these meetings, but the director was very insistent. He believed that the authorities should not refuse. Lucy took the glass of strong drink from the director's hands. She intended to drink it instead of her friend, since she knew that she didn't drink at all. Dory tried to stop her because the glass had a very high alcohol content, but the director was very amused by this situation. He expected such behavior from the first girl physical education teacher. The director didn't even have time to drink his glass when Lucy became inspired and was already finishing the second glass of strong alcohol, but even her friend could no longer stop her. At that moment, Jeremy approached. He was surprised at how much fun was happening here, and no one even called him, because everyone celebrated his arrival at this school, but no one had had a drink with him yet. The director immediately took the situation into his own hands and began to say words of gratitude to Mr. Baskett for becoming part of their wonderful team. After the toast, the director took his leave and went to make a toast to another table, leaving Jeremy, Lucy, and Dory alone. As soon as the director was gone, Lucy pounced on Jeremy and began to stretch his mouth into a smile, saying what a charming smile he had and what a damn handsome face he had. A crowd of teachers gathered behind them. Everyone looked in bewilderment and whispered among themselves. Some said that she was drunk, some that she had gone crazy. Jeremy was, to put it mildly, embarrassed by such attention in his direction, and immediately told Lucy that this was the second attack that day, and something should be done about it. The physical education teacher realized what a stupid thing she had just done, and all because of the excess drink. She immediately grabbed her head, which was incredibly split. Dory shouted at her friend, calling her by her first and last name, and said that it was time for them to go home. Enough adventures for today. At that very moment, Mr. Baskett interrupted her with a question about the teacher's first and last name. He said that at school, he had a friend who had the same name. Lucy felt an electric shock. She instantly sobered up and realized that he seemed to remember her. Beginning of Chapter 3. She decided to lie and said that she did not go to this school, and her last name was quite common. "Well, okay, maybe it really is a coincidence. It happens," Jeremy said. He volunteered to take Lucy and Dory home. Dory insisted that they could get there themselves. As long as she was with Lucy, they were completely safe. To which Jeremy said with a grin that he was not sure about the safety of passersby, looking at Lucy's condition. The new math teacher dropped Dory off at her stop and she left, leaving Lucy and Jeremy alone. At that moment, Miss Carey was flooded with memories of her past, a past that is connected with Jeremy Baskett. He couldn't believe that the girl could fight, and even with 3 guys at the same time, and Lucy was pleased with herself because she did them. One fragile girl defeated 3 guys. Jeremy Baskett carefully treated the wound on the back of his girlfriend's head. He was worried about her and thought that in the future, someone would worry just like him. Her memories were interrupted by the touch of an old acquaintance. They arrived at her house and touched to tell Miss Lucy about it. Lucy saw Mr. Baskett get out of the car after her. She tried to stop him and make him understand that there was no point in accompanying her. She would get home just fine. A cat was waiting for her at home, and a lot of thoughts about him, about her first love, about his smile, about his beautiful eyes, and about how he could not recognize her. She remembered all his touches, how he touched her birthmark as if it were today, and not 7 years ago. The warmth of his fingers remained on her neck, and Lucy could not forget it. Miss Carrot remembered how he told her to see him tomorrow, but tomorrow is Saturday. Beginning of Chapter 4. While Lucy was reminiscing, Jeremy was haunted by this strange coincidence. He decided to call his former classmate George and find out more about Lucy Carrot. A classmate said that she did not show up for the homecoming evening. However, she does not communicate with anyone from the class, however. About a week ago, he met her at the airport, and Lucy said that she lived abroad. He also noticed that Carrot had changed a lot since her school days when she was a tomboy. Now she looks much more feminine. George was extremely surprised that 7 years later, Jeremy still had not forgotten Lucy, because he was rejected by her and could have long ago found himself another girl. And then their conversation was interrupted by the mover. Beginning of Chapter 5. Lucy was sitting in the kitchen eating donuts when the doorbell rang, and her food order was brought. But as soon as she opened the doors, her cat immediately jumped out into the corridor and ran into the next apartment. Miss Carrot stood at a loss and did not know what to do. She knocked on the apartment, but no one opened it, and then she saw that the door was not locked. She thought to herself how much she apologized to the owners, but the life of her cat was much more important, and so Lucy took a bold step into the neighbor's apartment, where she immediately saw her cat on the window. As soon as Lucy approached her, the cat immediately jumped up and jumped onto the shelf, which broke due to the weight of the cat, and all the contents began to fall on them with a roar. Someone grabbed Lucy and the cat and threw them to the floor, thereby avoiding the shelf and all its contents from falling on them. Miss Carrot was taken aback. Jeremy Baskett was lying next to her. For a second, it seemed to her that she had hit her head, and it was all a hallucination. Jeremy stood all wet, as in their first meeting 7 years later, and with a surprised face. He did not expect to see Lucy in his apartment, especially under such circumstances. Her new neighbor turned out to be none other than Jeremy Baskett, which is why yesterday he said, "We'll meet tomorrow." He wasn't wrong. Jeremy offered to help Lucy, but she refused, saying that she was able to get up on her own. His new neighbor began to apologize for breaking into his house without asking, because it was all about the cat that ran into his apartment. Lucy was very sorry that she had caused so much inconvenience and destruction in the apartment. She immediately began to rush around trying to return everything to its place. Jeremy left the girl to clean up the mess, and she began to remember how much inconvenience she had brought him over the last couple of days. First, she poured cold water on him, then the incident at the party, and now this debacle. While cleaning, Lucy discovered a secret edition of the dessert kitten from Mr. Box and immediately rushed to Jeremy asking where he got it from. She couldn't find it for a very long time. Jeremy replied that he had been planning to give it to his friend for a long time, but somehow it didn't work out. At that moment, Lucy thought about the significance of this friend for him. It was a collectible toy. The guy smiled and invited Miss Carrot to take this kitten for herself if she really needed him. but in return, he would need something from her. Beginning of Chapter 6. Jeremy forced Lucy to help him make tables for the students. Although he had just taken office as a class teacher, he had already managed to analyze the students' performance and their strengths and weaknesses. The girl was surprised by the new teacher's ability to determine the students' sides with the help of tables and information about mistakes made in the exam. The cat Lucy hissed sharply, and her fur stood on end because there was another cat in the room. The cat Jeremy jumped into the window. At this moment, Lucy was once again flooded with memories from the past, the distant past. United States of America, North Carolina pet store. Little Lucy turned to the saleswoman with a request to buy a small kitten, handing her the last coin. But the saleswoman recognized her. It was the same girl who had brought stray kittens a couple of days ago, but this time she was already alone, without a boy. The saleswoman asked why she wanted to take away the kitten that they themselves had recently brought. But for Lucy, this was important, since this kitten was the last memory of Jeremy. Now Lucy had a new friend, Lucky, who reminded her of her first love. Start of Chapter 7. Jeremy entered the gym and saw Lucy cleaning up equipment. He asked why she was doing this alone and where all the children were. The physical education teacher replied that the children all immediately disappeared as soon as she asked them to help. But since he was here, she thought that he would help her. But Jeremy also disappeared at that hour. Lucy did not expect such behavior because she helped him all night with his tables on her day off, and he just vanished as soon as he heard a request for help. Meanwhile, Mr. Jeremy heard the students discussing the physical education teacher in a less than flattering manner. The mathematics teacher was outraged by such impudence and that anyone could have any complaints against such a tiny person. He suggested that the students hold a competition. The condition was that if the students win, then they will be exempt from today's math test. And if Jeremy wins, then the students will apologize to Miss Carrot and go clean up the gym. The students crowded around the door to the gym. They were all red and wet. Miss Lucy was surprised what had happened in such a short period of time and why they all came. As it turned out, everything was thanks to Mr. Jeremy. He won the competition, and the students came to do their task. A math teacher appeared near the gym, a full smile on his face. The students finished cleaning quickly enough and ran straight to Mr. Jeremy, asking him to repeat the competition again. They were amazed at his ability to play so skillfully. Lucy became depressed. She remembered that he was always popular and absolutely everyone loved him and trusted him, and she was his complete opposite. Mr. Basket called out to the girl and offered to play basketball with them. After all, she graduated from the College of Physical Education, which means she should play well. Miss Carrot was interested in this proposal, especially since her first love herself wants to play with her. Start of Chapter 8. North Carolina High School Sports Court. A support group gathered in the courtyard. Everyone was impressed by their teachers. Jeremy came up with the idea that the loser pays for dinner, and Lucy made fun of him, saying that it means he wants to treat her. The whole stadium was noisy. Everyone was cheering for their teachers, and at that moment, Mr. Basket scored his three-pointer. Not only were the students delighted with Jeremy, but also the young teachers kept their eyes on him. One of them seemed to know him from somewhere. There was pandemonium at the stadium. Obviously, something had happened. It seems that Mr. Basket injured his hand. The students ran to the aid station to get ice to apply a cold compress. At that same second, Lucy ran up to him. She looked at his hand and realized that it was most likely a ligament rupture, and he urgently needed to see a doctor. In the past, Jeremy was injured because of her, and now again, she agreed to play basketball with him. The math teacher was at a loss how Lucy could so easily determine that he had a ligament rupture. She is not a doctor. He suspected something was wrong, grabbed Lucy from behind, and his gaze fell on the back of her head, where there was a scar, the same as his school friend. Jeremy turned Lucy towards him and asked if she wanted to explain, his junior in school. Start of Chapter 9. Miss Carrot pretended that she had not heard his question and began to make excuses that she was a physical education teacher and was obliged to know about injuries of this nature. Mr. Basket grimaced and didn't take her excuse seriously because no gym teacher could tell the nature of the injury just by looking at him. Jeremy turned around and left. He can't understand why Lucy refuses to remember him. A crowd of schoolchildren watched this scene. They whispered among themselves that there was clearly something between their teachers. Entering the school, Lucy met Dory, and their eyes were caught by a very interesting scene, the participants of which were Jeremy and the head teacher of the school, Miss Laurie. Laurie suggested that Jeremy should have lunch together sometime. Lucy looked at them with obvious jealousy, abruptly jumped up and walked up to Jeremy and head teacher Laurie. She grabbed him from behind and in an insistent tone demanded that he go with her to the doctor. Laurie stood in bewilderment at the situation that had happened, but at that very moment the thought came to her that it was fate to meet Jeremy again after so many years. City Clinic, at an appointment with traumatologist Mr. Robert Cowley. The doctor found nothing serious and recommended that Jeremy avoid physical activity and get plenty of rest until his arm healed. Lucy was on edge. Questions kept pouring in. Was everything really all right? Was the doctor sure that there was no ligament rupture? Mr. Robert Cowley reassured her, because it was not for nothing that he had 20 years of experience as a traumatologist. He clearly understands this. Jeremy and Lucy thanked the doctor and headed straight out of the office. Lucy's phone was blowing up with messages that came in the family chat. Everyone was heatedly discussing the guy whom she had just brought into her uncle's office. Mr. Cowley recognized him as his niece's first love. Jeremy saw part of the correspondence, and then Lucy could no longer escape. She admitted to him that she was the same Lucy Carrot he knew at school. Jeremy was furious. He didn't understand why she was hiding this from him. Start of chapter 10. There was a tense atmosphere in the office when suddenly the school bell rang. Dory invited Lucy and Jeremy to have lunch together, but Jeremy refused, saying that he was going to lunch with other math teachers, and Lucy pretended not to hear her friend's question. The director entered the teacher's room. Since Miss Carrot and Mr. Basket missed the last meeting, he informed them about the innovations. Now they must work in a group. He also informed them that each group had to prepare a performance for Teacher's Day and a creative festival, which would take place on the same day. Looking at each other, Lucy and Jeremy agreed with the director's words. Sunday high school gym, preparing for the competition. Dory entered the gym and was surprised by the appearance of her friend. Could she really perform in a tree costume? It turned out that the leader of their group asked the director to help others with preparation instead of performing. Inside this suit were all the items that foreign language teachers need, and so Lucy decided to transfer everything at once. The gaze of the two friends fell on the beautiful-sounding duet. It was Mr. Jeremy and Miss Laurie. They were discussing a successful rehearsal. A voice was heard from behind the scenes, asking to quickly bring all the props that Lucy was wearing. She began to run and, not thinking that the suit was too heavy, she immediately fell in front of the entire team, and laughter erupted in the hall. With tears in her eyes, Lucy stood up and carried the props backstage. USA, North Carolina, Lucy's apartment. When she woke up, she thought to put on a little makeup, because today is a holiday, and in everyday life, she doesn't wear makeup at all. And then Lucy remembered yesterday's shame and how everyone laughed at her. She wanted to fall into the ground. She took out her phone and texted her friend to bring her cosmetics and do her makeup. Start of chapter 11. Dory came to the rescue not only with cosmetics, but also took with her a suitcase of things. A friend suspected something was wrong with Lucy's desire to do makeup, and Jeremy was clearly involved. Dory did not let up. She was sure that Jeremy had feelings for Lucy, but it was not yet clear what. Miss Carrot was lost in thought, and it seemed to her that she had offended her old acquaintance by saying that she did not want to remember him. Dory was furious. She didn't understand why Lucy was doing this to him. Lucy burst into tears. She always knew that this was her true love, but he always treated her only as a friend, and she did not want this to happen again. Her friend began to calm her down because she didn't even ask about Jeremy's feelings. Maybe she was wrong. Dory insisted that Lucy apologize to Jeremy tomorrow. USA, North Carolina High School. In the corridor, the students began to whisper. A beautiful girl entered the school, looking like their physical education teacher from behind. Indeed, it was their teacher, but she did not look as usual, but with her hair and makeup in a skirt and high-heeled shoes. Lucy approached the students and began to reprimand them for their inappropriate appearance. The trowel was unbuttoned, and their trouser legs were pulled up. At that moment, Mr. Basket approached. He was shocked by what he saw, and did not take his eyes off Miss Carrot. He noticed that she was standing in one shoe and holding the other in her hand. Lucy smiled shyly and put on the other shoe. Jeremy hurried Lucy to the meeting, turned around, and began to walk away. At that moment, the girl realized that she did not have time to apologize to him, and he was clearly offended. She called out to him, but immediately fell into a stupor. All the words seemed to disappear from her head. A basketball rolled to Lucy's feet, and then the idea came to her because the loser of the competition promised to treat the winner to dinner. Jeremy accepted her invitation to have dinner together, saying that since she wanted to treat him, then why not? Lucy was indignant that she should not treat her to dinner, but he should treat her because he did not score his last goal. Jeremy made puppy dog eyes and said that he suffered in this competition, pointing to his hand. To the side, the head teacher of the school, Miss Laurie, watched them. Dory was at home when her phone rang. It was Lucy. She was in a panic. During her date with Jeremy, Lucy went to the ladies' room to call her friend and tell her about her experiences. She was not so nervous even when she took part in international competitions. The girl decided to confess to her first love that in her school days she mistook his kindness for love. But she is still very ashamed of this, so she did not want to recognize him. Dory approved of her friend's intentions, and they said goodbye. Laurie approached Lucy and Jeremy's table. Having overheard their conversation at school, she also came to this restaurant, saying that all the tables were occupied and could she join them. Miss Laurie asked if she had interfered with their date. Lucy immediately began to make excuses that no, she didn't interfere, of course, because they were here because of a lost bet. The waitress came to place her order. Jeremy ordered spaghetti. Lucy ordered a large steak and rice, fried potatoes, and 2 rice balls with meat. Miss Laurie ordered a small sandwich. The guys looked at her in surprise. Did she really come to the restaurant for a small sandwich? Jeremy got up to go get the girls' drinks. Laurie asked for green tea with lemon and honey. And for Lucy, the guy took a cola. He remembered her preferences from school. As soon as Mr. Basket left, Laurie immediately switched to Lucy's appearance. She became interested in whether she dressed like that especially for Jeremy. Lucy replied, confused, that this was not the case. Miss Laurie continued her monologue that she knows Jeremy well enough, and it's not enough to just change her image. He doesn't like tomboys. He loves honesty and won't appreciate Lucy pretending to be someone else. In conclusion, she added that if Miss Carrot was not going to change completely and forever, then she should stop communicating with Mr. Basket. Beginning of Chapter 12. Amazed by the impudence of her colleague, Lucy decided to strike back, saying that Miss Laurie really loves the local sandwiches so much that she is ready to go to the restaurant for them even when it is full. The head teacher was a little confused. She really likes these particular sandwiches and in this particular restaurant. There was no stopping Lucy. Not that she suspected Laurie of anything, but this restaurant didn't have a special type of meat. They only offered chicken, so Lucy concluded that her colleague had come to ruin their dinner with Jeremy. The head teacher didn't have time to respond when Jeremy returned with the drinks. There was complete silence at the table. As the girls approached the cash register to pay the bill, they learned that the bill had already been paid. Jeremy had taken care of it. Lucy was indignant because she lost the argument, but Mr. Basket said that she should save the money to go to a more expensive restaurant. This one is too cheap. The guys said goodbye to Miss Laurie. She was going to call a taxi, and they decided to take a walk. At that moment, an unknown person ran up to Laurie, snatched the bag from her hands, and disappeared. Start of Chapter 13. Lucy quickly took off her skirt, grabbed her shoes, and ran after the thief. Jeremy froze at what he saw. It was not for nothing that she picked up the shoes. With just one throw, she stopped the criminal. The criminal began to take a knife out of his pocket when Jeremy ran up and stopped him, intercepting the knife from his hands. Having handed the thief over to the police, Mr. Basket began to scold Lucy for her recklessness, that she couldn't risk herself like that. She was a girl, after all. He was very angry with her, and Lucy stood there and didn't understand why. She believed that it was only her shoes that got in the way. Miss Carrot handed the bag to Laurie, who had just arrived, but she didn't even thank her in return. Jeremy approached Lucy and demanded to climb on him. He would take Lucy home. He said that no refusals would be accepted. They had a lot to discuss. The guys said goodbye to Miss Laurie and went home. Lucy was the first to start the dialogue. She asked Jeremy for forgiveness for first pretending that she didn't know him. Then she also shouted. She gathered her thoughts to tell him the most important thing, but she didn't know where to start yet, saying that she was a disaster at school, so she didn't know how to communicate with him. Jeremy didn't think she was a disaster, but on the contrary, she was very sweet and sincere to him, which is why he came to see her, despite the fact that he is older. He asked Lucy why she didn't come that day 7 years ago after the ceremony. She came, but when she saw him with a high school student, she decided that her presence was unnecessary. Lucy and Jeremy approached the house. Lucy called an old acquaintance to her, citing the fact that she had a first aid kit at home, but near the door she discovered that there were no keys in her purse. Miss Basket was texting her friend. Dory was surprised that Lucy would stay at Jeremy's all night. Jeremy brought a first aid kit to treat the wound. At this time, Lucy received a message from Miss Laurie that she had reached the house. Jeremy's school friend bombarded him with questions about his girlfriend. She was very interested in why he didn't have a date. He decided not to answer Lucy's questions and began to tickle her. After treating the wound, the guys went to bed, passing by the room where Miss Carrot was sleeping. Jeremy saw that she had not closed the door. It seemed to him a gesture of trust towards him. He went into the room to cover her with a blanket, but barely caught Lucy's blow. It turned out that she was fighting even in her sleep. Jeremy was overcome by a wave of memories. He decided to try everything again. Maybe after 7 years it will work out. Start of chapter 14. Early in the morning, Lucy woke up abruptly from a nightmare. Jeremy was sitting on the floor next to her bed. He was washing dishes in the kitchen and heard his girlfriend scream. Entering the room, he approached her and realized that she was having a nightmare. At that moment, she hit him. Lucy began to apologize for what happened. Jeremy looked at her and smiled. USA, North Carolina High School, teacher's room. Dory noticed that her friend came to school without sleep. She smiled sarcastically. Lucy and Dory saw the director and Mr. Basket in the corridor. The director asked him what kind of incident happened to him. Miss Carrot's friend decided that there was something between Lucy and Jeremy that night. But Lucy began to deny everything and asked to throw these terrible thoughts out of her head. The physical education teacher received a message from an old friend that he would soon open a pastry shop and invite her to the opening. Dory was immediately interested in this old friend. In the photo, he seemed quite attractive to her, and she wondered if he and Lucy were close. Miss Carrot was already approaching the new confectionery shop when suddenly she was bumped into. It was her younger brother, Alex. He was very happy to see her that he shouted about it throughout the street. Lucy was at a loss as to what he was doing here. It turned out that his mother went to the store, and his father said that his older sister's house was somewhere nearby, so Alex went to look for it. The boy began to make excuses that he went all alone because he missed his older sister. She did not come to their house at all. Lucy was about to take the baby home when the boy fell and injured his hand. Alex's mother ran up, snatched him from Lucy's hands, and began shouting at her that she had no conscience, that she knew about the bad attitude towards her. But the child was not to blame for anything, and how dare she offend him? Miss Carrot could not say a word. She was amazed at what had happened. Her thoughts were that her stepmother had gone crazy. Finally, she was able to get out of her stupor and accused the woman of not watching her son, and not knowing the situation, yelling at her, advised her stepmother to stay at home and play a good wife and mother. The woman began shouting throughout the street that Lucy should not come anywhere near her son again, and that she was a bad example for people. Jeremy appeared out of nowhere, walked over to Lucy and helped her up. The stepmother saw that a young man approached her stepdaughter and sarcastically said that Lucy could really find someone who could help her. Following Jeremy and Lucy, she shouted that she felt sorry for the guy because he did not know the true face of her stepdaughter. Mr. Basket took Miss Carrot by the hand and turned to the woman and said that he knew Lucy much better than she did and was not going to listen to her being unfoundedly accused. Start of chapter 15. Alex intervened in their conversation and began to defend his sister with tears in his eyes. The stepmother turned her attention to him, explaining that he should not call her sister because she never treated him like a brother. Lucy turned around and was about to leave when her stepmother again screamed for her to fail and that she would tell her father everything. Their scandal was interrupted by a guy who came up. It turned out to be Lucy's old friend and an acquaintance of her stepmother, Bobby. Today, he has the opening of a pastry shop here, and he invited Lucy to the event. At that second, Lucy lowered Jeremy's hand. Bobby heard that someone had hurt little Alex and offered to look at the video recording from his car, which was parked nearby, in order to understand the situation. The stepmother refused, citing the fact that it was high time for them to go. Alexa broke free from his mother's arms and ran to Lucy. He hugged her tightly. Alex's mother came over, grabbed him abruptly, and dragged him home. Bobby turned Lucy's attention. He didn't understand where she was looking so intently if her old friend was right in front of her. Start of chapter 16. Lucy turned her gaze to Bobby, and they began to fool around, as old friends do. Jeremy, standing nearby, decided to remind him of his presence. Bobby immediately thought it was Lucy's boyfriend. She began to deny that they were just old acquaintances who studied at the same school and now live next door. Bobby is amused by the fact that there are too many coincidences, and this situation reminds him of a romantic story. He introduced himself to Jeremy as an old friend of Lucy's, saying that their fathers were friends. After these words, Mr. Basket relaxed and exhaled. Bobby invited the guys to sit in his pastry shop and eat a couple of donuts, but Jeremy refused because he had a lot of work and went back to school. Lucy could not forget how her school acquaintance took her hand in front of her stepmother. Jeremy was walking and thinking about the past. It turned out that he was not the only guy in her life. When suddenly Lucy grabbed him by the coat, she offered him her help in compiling tables for students. The math teacher took and covered Miss Carrot's ears. He didn't want her to hear Bobby, from whom she ran away, calling her. He wanted her to be only his. Start of chapter 17. Lucy escaped from Jeremy's hands. He began to come up with the idea that his students were arguing whether a person could hear something with their ears closed, and decided to conduct an experiment. She felt a catch and asked next time to experiment on her students, and not on her. USA, North Carolina High School, Autumn Sports Festival. Lucy was at the head of her team. A crowd of guys followed her in synchronized steps. All the girls in the stands screamed with joy. Having finished introducing their team, someone from the audience told Lucy that they were looking for her. It turned out to be Bobby, who decided to bring her donuts from his pastry shop when he learned that her school was hosting a fall sports festival. Their dialogue was observed by Mr. Basket and Dory. Lucy's friend complained to the math teacher that she decided to somehow look into his candy store and check who her friend was hanging out with. But this guy didn't even want to look at her. Jeremy was surprised. He thought that Dory was mistaken, but it turned out that no, she would never forget that look. Mr. Basket decided that this guy is not as simple as he seems. He may turn out to be two-faced. Bobby climbed over the fence to be next to Lucy. Seeing this, Dory decided to leave, since she did not like this guy, and she did not want to put her friend in an awkward position. Lucy's old friend waved to Jeremy. Mr. Basket apologized and said that he had to go. He needed to check on more students. Bobby noticed how his girlfriend was looking intently at her colleague. He suspected something was wrong. The host of the event announced a break for lunch. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the students decided to organize their own long jump competition and invited Bobby to participate. Jeremy saw the guys jumping and reminded them to warm up well. When one of the students turned around, he saw Bobby. The math teacher was confused. He asked Bobby why he was still here and why he was wearing a school uniform, to which Bobby replied that he had not played sports for a long time, so he decided to have a little fun. The students asked Mr. Basket to join them, but he refused. Bobby decided to hook him, saying that Jeremy was simply afraid that he would not jump over him. Mr. Basket's eyes lit up. He accepted the challenge and agreed to the fight. Lucy was sitting on a bench and eating donuts brought by Bobby, when suddenly she heard the sound of a commotion nearby. It was her friend Dory. She was shouting at someone. The guy Dory was cursing at didn't understand what was happening, but she didn't let up, reproaching him for his rudeness. Every time he saw her, he made such a face. From her words, he realized that she had confused him with someone and asked Dory to address him correctly if she wanted to talk to him next time. Dory was shocked that she had really met twins. Start of chapter 18. The stranger said that he did not like stupid people. Lucy's friend was indignant at how dare he call her stupid. The The guy was interested in this daring girl. He asked him to wait a little, and she would understand what he meant. Someone called the stranger, and if he doesn't hurry, he will be able to say goodbye to his treasure. Lucy heard conversations from the direction of the sports ground. Glass was found in the diving sand, and someone was injured. It was Jeremy. She immediately ran up to him and began to examine how deep the cut was. He was pleased with her attention. He showed her the glass in her hands and that he was in perfect order. There was no cut. Jeremy helped Lucy up and instructed the students to immediately remove all glass from the sand after lunch break. Miss Carrot realized that her old friend had disappeared somewhere. The students said that someone called him, and he left urgently. She was upset that he didn't even say goodbye. Jeremy decided to turn the attention away from himself by asking Lucy to go with him to the infirmary, since his arm began to hurt after the jump. She began to deny that this was a matter for the school nurse. Let her call her. But Mr. Basket was persistent, citing the fact that she was a physical education teacher, and for her, this was a trivial matter. He grabbed Lucy and dragged her with him to the infirmary, not allowing her to finish her lunch of a box of donuts. Arriving at the first aid station, Miss Carrot began to examine Jeremy's hand. He asked to massage it because he works with his head and his body is weak. Lucy thought that he was pushing for pity because she had known him for a very long time, and he had never had a weak body. She remembered how he used to bandage her wounds, only he took care of her like no one else. Jeremy was amazed that she remembered everything, and he decided that it was time to ask a question that had been tormenting him for a long time. He asked if Lucy had ever liked him. Start of chapter 19. Lucy did not expect such a question. She began to struggle. Lunchtime was already over, and she had to return to her students. Jeremy pinned her down, grabbed her hand, and demanded an answer to his question. The physical education teacher began to remember the past, how she could not imagine her life without him. He was the only warm ray of light among all the darkness in her life. Lucy exhaled, collected her thoughts, and admitted to Jeremy that she liked him. He was always there when others turned away and still trusted him. But in the end, she added that she was glad to have a friend like Jeremy. Mr. Basket let go of her hand. He didn't expect Lucy to treat him as a friend. He got ready to leave and finally told her that in the future, everything could change, and she had better appreciate him. At that moment, Lucy's phone rang, and while taking it out, a bag of sweets fell out of her pocket. Jeremy asked who it was from. It turned out that Bobby had recently had dinner with her family, and little Alex asked him to give the candy to his older sister. Mr. Basket remembered Bobby handing something to Lucy, which turned out to be candy from her little brother. Miss Carrot was upset. Alex loved sweets very much, but he was not allowed to eat them often so that tooth decay would not appear, and now he would have to wait a whole week for his sweets. Jeremy understood how much the younger brother loved his sister, but he did not understand what happened, that she had such a relationship with her stepmother. It turned out that Lucy upset the wedding that her stepmother was so looking forward to. Start of chapter 20. Miss Carrot read the message and bowed down. Her father invited her to visit. The whole family, led by her grandmother, would gather. Jeremy remembered that during school days Lucy lived with her aunt. He wondered if she would accept her father's invitation. She didn't know whether to agree or not. It seemed to her that there was no point in coming. This house was not for her. Lucy sat in her apartment and looked through old photographs of Jeremy, her mother. Miss Carrot indulged in memories where she sat in the hospital in front of the bed of her mother, who was dying and crying. She did not want to lose her, and did not want her father to find a replacement for her. Mom patted her daughter on the head and reassured her that her father deserved to be happy, and she did not have to love her stepmother. Lucy began to cry. She felt very lonely because her father had found a replacement for her. She stood near her father's house and was afraid to enter the entrance. Not far away, she saw her older brother Carl. He stood with the girl and stroked her head, calming her down. Lucy smiled. She and her brother had not seen each other for a very long time, and here he was not alone, but with his girlfriend Rosie. Carl introduced the girls to each other. Rosie was amazed by Lucy's beauty. Having met, the guys went to visit their father. Entering the apartment, the grandmother immediately began complimenting her grandson, but she didn't seem to notice Lucy. Uncle came out of the room, greeted Lucy, and invited her to come in and feel at home. The grandmother turned her gaze to her granddaughter for a second and continued to praise Carl. Lucy walked into the room and sat down on the sofa next to her father. She felt the coldness from him. The stepmother's voice was heard from the kitchen. Carl and his girlfriend went to help, and Lucy remained in the room with her grandmother. The grandmother turned her attention to her granddaughter, accusing her of never being at home and not getting help from her. The father tried to intervene in the grandmother's monologue, but the grandmother stopped him, calling her granddaughter a lazy animal, just like her mother. Lucy's stepmother came out of the kitchen and began to calm her grandmother down and protect her stepdaughter. Grandmother did not let up. She reminded Miss Carrot that she asked not to become the same as her mother, but with age, she resembles her more and more. Lucy clenched her hand tightly and said that she shouldn't have come back. She turned around and headed out of the apartment, her grandmother shouting after her that she had ruined a family meeting. Her father caught up with her in the corridor and asked her to come back and apologize to her grandmother. Lucy ignored her father's request and said why her mother was unhappy. She loved him so much, but was always scolded by her grandmother, and her father always watched and was silent. The father remained silent. Lucy turned around and left, leaving behind so that they would not call her again. Little Alex heard the whole conflict. He sat in his room and cried. Jeremy was sitting at home, doing worksheets for his students, when he heard someone banging on Lucy's door. It was Bobby with some guy. It turned out that their mutual friend had disappeared. Start of chapter 21. Jeremy couldn't fully understand what was happening, how Lucy disappeared, and what could have happened. Bobby said that this afternoon she quarreled with her family, left, and now cannot be found anywhere. Jeremy started calling Dory. Maybe she knows some details about her friend. Dory didn't know where Lucy was. The last time she talked to her was this morning. The guys decided to split up and go in search of their friend. Jeremy decided to go around all the places where he thought Lucy might be. Dory called Mr. Basket. She seemed to have an idea where her friend might be. Lucy was sitting, drinking beer and remembering today's meeting with her family, when someone came up from behind and called out to her. As soon as Dory found out about her friend's disappearance, she immediately got ready and ran straight to her house. Near the door, she met the same stranger whom she had seen more than once in Bobby's pastry shop. He asked dismissively what she was doing here. Dory didn't understand why he hated her so much until the guy admitted that she had bad taste in men. She found out that the stranger was not in a relationship, and this angered her even more that a child like him dared to say that she had no taste in men. Dory decided that there was no time to sort things out, but she needed to find her friend, especially since she guessed where she might be. But the stranger did not let her go alone, but went with her. Lucy turned and saw her childhood friend. He was the first to find her, but Lucy was too drunk. Bobby tried to take the can of beer from her and take her home, but Lucy began to break free. Being drunk, she became extremely disobedient. This was observed nearby by Jeremy, who arrived a little later than Bobby. Start of chapter 22. Bobby tried to pick up his friend and take her home, but she stubbornly resisted. At that moment, Jeremy approached them. Lucy's old friend did not expect to see him here. The girl was also surprised by the appearance of the guys. Jeremy was angry with her that Lucy did not think about her safety, but she, in turn, did not understand why he wore glasses and looked like her father. Bobby grabbed the girl and was going to take her to his home, since he did not want to trust her in this state to Jeremy, especially since Bobby could have his mother look after her. Mr. Basket's phone rang. It was Dory, and at that second he got the idea to tell Bobby that Dory would stay at Lucy's house to look after her. Lucy's friend didn't quite understand what had just happened, but she agreed. Jeremy asked Bobby to take Lucy home, where a friend was waiting for her, who was very worried about her and would look after her. Arriving home, Miss Carrot was very happy to see her friend and squeezed her in a tight hug. Jeremy felt jealous in his heart. He would like to be in Dory's place. The guys left the apartment and began to say goodbye. Bobby finally asked Jeremy to call at any time if something happened to Lucy. Bobby was surprised why his friend talked to Jeremy as if he already knew him, but it turned out that Dory managed to tell him about Mr. Basket and that he was Lucy's first love. Miss Carrot's old friend was even more surprised. Lucy had never told him about this. At that moment, he experienced mixed feelings. Bobby's friend asked what happened when they found the teacher. Otherwise, he returned somewhat upset. everything turned out not to be as Lucy's old friend imagined. He didn't even think about the fact that this girl had matured and might like someone. Jeremy knocked on Lucy's door. Dory opened it and assured him that Lucy was sleeping, and there was no need to worry. Mr. Basket wanted to discuss Lucy's problems with her friend and see if she knew that Lucy crashed her father's wedding. She only knew that her friend did not start acting this way out of nowhere. She loves her mother very much, unlike her grandmother, who hates Lucy too. The guy was surprised that despite all this, his old friend decided to accept his father's invitation and go to a family meeting. Dory is sure that her difficult childhood has left its mark on Lucy's life and should not be deceived by her independent appearance and ability to take care of herself. Jeremy realized that such a childhood probably left unhealed wounds, and this is not forgotten. The guys heard a strange sound from Lucy's bedroom and ran to check what had happened. The girl was sitting in boxing gloves and offered to play with her. Dory immediately refused this idea, and Jeremy agreed. Lucy boxed and fell onto the ottoman. Jeremy leaned over her, joking if she felt better. The girl touched his face with her hands. Start of chapter 23. Lucy pulled off Jeremy's glasses. They reminded her of her father. He didn't understand what was wrong with her. Maybe she wanted to talk to him. Lucy lay there and wondered if it was possible to replace someone she loved if he died. Jeremy was sure that there are people who cannot be replaced, because he also had such a person, and he admitted to Lucy that she was this person. Hearing this, she became bolder and kissed him on the cheek. The guy grabbed her hand and asked if she understood what she was doing, but Lucy fell asleep. She was still drunk. Next day, Mr. Basket's apartment. He wanted to invite her to a cafe, but was not sure that she would agree if she remembered what happened yesterday. Jeremy knocked on the door of Lucy's apartment, but no one opened it. He thought that he was late and she had already left. The guy decided to call her and ask if she remembers what happened yesterday. She picked up the phone and heard Jeremy's invitation to go have breakfast together. She said that she couldn't. Her aunt had returned, and she decided to visit her. From the conversation, Mr. Basket realized that Lucy did not remember anything about the kiss, and he wondered what if, in a drunken state, she kissed not only him, but also Bobby. Dory came into Lucy's room. She heard her conversation with Jeremy, and she wondered why she lied about her aunt. Dory felt like she had missed something interesting, but her friend didn't want to share the details of that night. While Lucy's friend went to get water, the girl sat and thought whether this kiss was an illusion, and if not, then maybe she should pretend that nothing happened. USA, North Carolina, Aunt Lucy Mary's apartments. Seeing her niece, Mary rushed into her arms. They had not seen each other for a very long time. The more she looked at her niece, she reminded her of her mother, Lucy, although everyone said that her niece was a copy of Mary. The girls sat and drank coffee. Mary already knew that Lucy had come to her for a reason, but that something had happened in her life. Miss Carrot admitted that she had recently met her first love, and having gotten drunk that night, she did something stupid and kissed him. Aunt listened attentively to her story. Lucy did not let up. She did not know how to look into Jeremy's eyes now, and they are not only neighbors, but also live next door. Mary patted Lucy on the head and asked if she still liked him. Jeremy meant a lot to her, but she didn't want to lose him again. Start of chapter 24. Mary was glad that Lucy's girlish essence had finally emerged, and if she treated him so carefully and did not want to lose him, then she had definitely fallen in love. Her aunt gave her advice that Jeremy should find out everything about her feelings, and if they are not mutual, then she should let him go. Mary let her think about what Lucy would like, but she remembered that if she didn't get Jeremy's attention now, someone else might. The woman was convinced that Lucy should act, otherwise she might regret it later. Lucy agreed. She couldn't lose Jeremy again, much less see him with someone else. While Mary was finishing her project, Lucy decided to go and buy beef rice for lunch. Coming out of the entrance, she saw Jeremy standing next to him. He was waiting for her. She was very surprised to see him here, and even more so that he was here for her. Jeremy took off his jacket and put it on Lucy. It was already quite cold outside, and she was dressed very lightly. Someone called Jeremy from behind, and the guys both turned to see who it was. It turned out to be Loli, a high school student from their school. She and Jeremy had not seen each other for a very long time, but she recognized him immediately. Lowly did not immediately recognize Lucy until Mr. Basket reminded her, and then she realized that this was the same elementary school girl with whom she went to the same club. The girl said that next week they decided to get together with the class, and their class teacher would come, and if Jeremy wanted, he could also join. Mr. Basket agreed, and the guys began to say goodbye to her, when Lowly took out a pass from her bag, which indicated that she was a mathematics teacher at a North Carolina high school. Lucy and Jeremy went to a cafe to buy lunch. The guy asked if she was going to return home or if she was visiting her aunt for a while. She was not going to return home for the next couple of days. She needed time to think and figure everything out. Lucy remembered that she never asked Jeremy what he was doing here. The guy laughed and said that he had come to pick her up. The girl did not take his words seriously and changed the topic. She was interested to know what he thought about Lowly. To him, she was a polite person who could deal with her problems, no matter how difficult they were, and was generally a good person. Lucy was satisfied with his answer. She thought to herself that it was probably not in vain that he then fell in love with Lowly. USA, North Carolina High School. Near the school, Dory and Lucy saw how the students surrounded the new teacher and began to bombard her with questions. Dory could not understand why graduates of this school were returning here as teachers. Dory thought that Lowly and Jeremy were similar. They fell in love with all the middle school students in a month and are now the most popular teachers. Lucy was upset because she lacked the ability to get along well with people. The school director and Mr. Basket approached Miss Lowly. The director gave parting words to the teachers so that they would not let the school down, because the preparation of students affects the rating. Lucy got angry every time she saw Jeremy and Lowly together. The school bell rang and Dory ran to class, leaving her friend alone to finish her work. At that moment, Lowly approached her. She asked to change places and give her a seat next to Mr. Jeremy. Start of chapter 25. They were preparing an open lesson together, and it would have been awkward to discuss it in front of the entire staff room. Just as Lucy wanted to say that she was against it, the director intervened in the conversation and said that the girls should switch places. After all, the physical education and mathematics teacher does not need to communicate so honestly. Jeremy walked into the staff room and saw that Lowly had taken Lucy's place. Lowly explained everything to him. Mr. Basket looked at his colleague's place. It was empty. A foreign language teacher came into the staff room and invited the math teachers to go see the director. Lowly began to get up from the table, stumbled, began to fall, and grabbed onto Jeremy. She began to apologize. Mr. Basket continued to hold her. At that moment, Lucy stood outside the door and listened. North Carolina High School cafeteria. The friends were sitting and having lunch. Jeremy approached them and asked to sit with them. Dory handed him the chewing gum, hinting that he would need it after the meal. Lucy and Jeremy turned purple. It seemed to them that Dory knew what happened that very night. Mr. Basket turned to Lucy, but she quickly finished eating, said that she had to go, got up from the table, and left. Jeremy didn't understand why she was avoiding him. Did she really remember everything? The guy sat and thought what else could have happened, that Lucy was behaving so strangely, and he remembered how they met Mary. Was she really jealous? Miss Carrot was the most difficult challenge he had ever faced. Mary approached Jeremy from behind. She asked what was happening to him, because during the time that she was watching him, he managed to be happy and sad. But he didn't tell her anything. There were 3 minutes left before the bell rang for class, and they left. Lucy was teaching a lesson outside and heard 2 students gossiping about Miss Mary and Mr. Jeremy standing in front. She was furious, took the basketball and threw it towards Jeremy, trying to hit him. Mr. Basket managed to catch the ball. Lucy felt ashamed of her action. She first did it, and then only thought about the consequences. She began to apologize to Jeremy and asked him to return the ball. He pretended not to hear anything and tried to lure her closer to him. She got angry, clenched her fists, and went to meet Jeremy. Lucy demanded the ball from him. Jeremy joked if she would run away from him again. The girl grabbed the ball from his hands and began to run away. At that moment, the ticket to the haunted house fell out of her pocket. Jeremy picked it up, but Lucy snatched the ticket from his hands. The guy offered to go with her so that she wouldn't be scared. She looked at Mary and said that there was no need to go with her. She was not going there alone. It was as if Jeremy had been doused with cold water. He needed to know who she was going there with. Start of chapter 26. The school bell rang, And Lucy, taking advantage of the situation, ran away as fast as she could so as not to answer Jeremy's question. In the staff room, Dory casually told Mr. Basket that she and Lucy were going to go to a haunted house this weekend, and he exhaled calmly. She invited Jeremy to go with them. She had 2 more tickets, and their friends could not go with them. The guy tensed up. He became interested in what friends Dory was talking about. But she didn't even have to ask. She laid it all out herself. It was Bobby and her friend. Jeremy happily took the ticket from her. Bobby's confectionery. Bobby drew a mouse on a donut, which his friend Justin noticed. Bobby started shouting to the whole candy store that he had drawn a cat, not a mouse. He was going to give this cat donut to Lucy tomorrow. Justin guessed that his friend was still in love with his childhood friend. There was an awkward atmosphere in the haunted house. The presenter explained the rules of staying in a haunted house. Start of chapter 27. The girls ran to complete all the tasks in order to get a super prize when the presenter stopped them. He didn't tell all the rules yet. The most important thing was that while completing tasks, they would be hunted by a ghost. The presenter asked to leave all the things in the storage lockers. The guys began to put everything away when Jeremy's phone rang. Lucy saw that Mary was calling him and began to listen to what they were talking about. In the evening, Mary asked to come visit her. Not only Lucy was listening to Jeremy's conversation, but also Dory and Bobby. Justin stood aside and looked at them disapprovingly. Lucy thought that it was good that she did not have time to confess her feelings to Jeremy. 7 years had already passed, and Mary and Jeremy did not part, day or night. Mary's boyfriend called Mr. Basket from her phone. He was also their classmate, but Lucy didn't know that. The guys began completing the quest. Dory clung to her friend out of fear and did not let her go. There was a ghost behind Dory. She was so scared that she pulled someone by the jacket and dragged him into the room. In the room, she realized that she had not grabbed her friend, but Justin, whom she hated. Lucy called Justin and asked him to take care of Dory, since she was very afraid of ghosts, and they would move on. Start of chapter 28. Justin wanted to continue the quest further, but Dory couldn't get up. Her legs wouldn't obey her. She sat and cried. Meanwhile, the 3 of them were left alone. Jeremy looked at Lucy and smiled. He was pleased with how passionate she was about the process of the game. His smile disappeared when Miss Carrot approached Bobby, and they began to discuss Justin and Dory among themselves. Jeremy decided it was time to take matters into his own hands and took Lucy by the hand. She looked at him questioningly. Bobby was so indignant that he shouted at Mr. Basket, "How dare he take her hand?" Jeremy took it as a joke and said that he was afraid of the dark, and he could also hold Bobby's hand, but Bobby refused to hold hands with the man. Lucy took the boys' hands and clasped them together, deciding that it was better for them to hold each other's hands than touch her. Jeremy found some small room, and at that moment Bobby shouted that there was a ghost in the room. Without hesitation, Mr. Basket took Lucy by the sleeve and dragged her into a small room. While they were hiding from the ghost, Miss Carrot was worried about her old friend, but Jeremy could not stand it and told her that she only ever thinks about him, although he saved her. Lucy became very angry and began to shout at the math teacher that as soon as his former classmate appeared, they would not part for a moment, and even tonight he would go to her. Jeremy broke into a smile and hugged Lucy to him. He finally understood why she had been avoiding him all this time. Start of chapter 29. Lucy began to struggle and begged to let her go. Jeremy held her tightly and didn't want to let go. The guy reminded her that she was not so restrained when she kissed her, but the girl began to make excuses that she was drunk and should not be taken seriously what was done in such a state. He held her tightly to him. He was happy that she remembered everything. When Jeremy asked if Lucy could do the same with another guy, she quipped that it was worth checking out. Jeremy ordered her not to dare check it, and at that moment a ghost entered the room. Justin and Dory were still in the room. The girl could not go and continue the quest. After another refusal, Justin freaked out and went to continue the quest alone, leaving Dory alone in the room. The girl began to cry. She really regretted that this scoundrel was next to her in such a situation. The ghost reached Dory, and at that moment Justin flew into the room, asked the actor to leave, and began to calm Dory down. Justin also showed his caustic character in this situation, telling his friend that he did not want to return. but he promised Lucy to take care of her friend. Dory took the guy by the hand and asked him not to swear. She was already scared. Start of chapter 30. Justin asked her to hold on to her forearm. It would be better. Dory remembered when they were in the room. She heard Justin screaming. She thought that he was not afraid of anything. She began to gloat over him, that if he slandered her, then everyone would know how he could scream. Having finished the quest, the guys began to discuss what happened to whom, and Bobby remembered that he heard someone's man scream and immediately looked at Justin. Dory came to the guy's defense and said it wasn't him. The guys were given prizes. These turned out to be coupons for food and a soft toy star. Dory wanted to exchange it for a small jellyfish, but she was refused. The girls called everyone over for lunch, and Lucy reminded Jeremy that he forgot his phone. The physical education teacher jealously began to give him the phone, since Mary was calling him at that moment. But for some reason, Jeremy smiled and asked her to answer the call. Beginning of chapter 31. Some guy answered the phone. He was waiting for Jeremy and asked where he was. Instead of Mr. Basket, the guys saw Dory and Lucy, and Miss Mary smiled and asked where Mr. Basket was. Lucy asked who it was next to her. She admitted that it was her boyfriend, and they had been together since school graduation. Miss Carrot was embarrassed, gave the phone to Jeremy, and was about to leave when Bobby called them to go redeem the coupons. The guys read on the coupons that they would be valid only next week, and they decided where to go for lunch now. Dory offered to go to Lucy and cook something, especially since she had not seen her kittens for a very long time. Mr. Basket had to go to a meeting with his classmates and the teacher, and then he promised to join them. When Jeremy returned, he found that the guys were sitting in the dark, half asleep, and there was no smell of food. It turned out that none of them knew how to cook. They ordered food, and it still hadn't arrived. Jeremy was very surprised that the guys owned a pastry shop, but didn't know how to cook anything other than donuts. And then he decided to take everything into his own hands. Dory was delighted. She believed that the best guy is the one who knows how to cook. Justin gave Dory a small jellyfish in his hands, in gratitude that she did not reveal his secret to the guys. Beginning of chapter 32. Dory couldn't believe that he went and bought her a jellyfish while everyone else at the market was buying groceries. Jeremy called everyone over for lunch. The girls looked at the variety of dishes and couldn't believe that the math teacher could cook like that. He said that his father was quite stern and loved his wife too much to allow her to spend time in the kitchen, so he knew how to cook from early childhood, but he would like to do it for the one he loves. The guys decided to play truth or dare. Bobby was told the truth, and he had to tell him when he cried for the last time. It was at 4 years old. Justin didn't even pay attention to him until Aunt Lucy came. Jeremy listened and realized that these were memories in which there would never be a place for him. Lucy looked at Bobby angrily. He took her cheeks and began to squeeze them. He thought that they were very soft. Jeremy joined him and grabbed Lucy's other cheek. They were really soft.